Okay, guys, and welcome to another episode of Geopolitics with Mark. So, this episode is kind of a continuation of the last episode I put up, which was Kennedy Kirk, where I basically explained the similarity between the Kennedy assassination and the Charlie Kirk assassination, who was behind it, and how the assassinations took place. And now let's deal with 9 11. 9/11 is also an incident that's similar to the Kennedy assassination, the Charlie Kirk assassination. Why? Because it was basically a ploy developed by the CIA to bring America into war in Iraq and Afghanistan for the purposes of taking Iraq's oil, but also to destabilize Saddam Hussein because he was going to be, a force that could stand up against Israel. There would be a threat to Israel. And all this time, Israel is creating greater Israel, which I've gone through. I think I've gone through this episode before that. My point of view about Israel is that their whole situation is conducive to prosperity-based defense as opposed to sort of like an aggressive, expansionist, greater Israel sort of approach. So, because I'm a European, I care what's happening to Israel. These are Europeans. They're in the desert. They were chased out into the desert. They're still Europeans, and they deserve to at least have a path back to Europe. So, and it's like, yeah. So that's anyway. That's a secondary thing. But that's how I feel. Being a European is like I realize that they can be at home in Europe, and that a 15-year blip is not gonna shouldn't take out 2,000 years of being there, and that the European Jews that were from Israel, they've been there from time immemorial. So anyway, getting back to the assassination, or getting back to 9/11. 9/11 basically was used to there was a push for this war in Israel, a push for this war in Iraq, and Israel was the lobbying nation. So with the pressure on the Bush administration to do something to start a war in Iraq, and then Iraq has oil, it's like, okay, so they rationalize it with Rumsfeld, the CIA, and basically they cook up a plan to, and this involves the Saudis. So the Bush administration, the Bush family has contacts with the Saudis through their business dealings, and the Saudis have a bunch of radicals. They have, they're training like jihadis and whatnot, and so it's like they decide, hey, you know what? Wouldn't it be something if we confuse the population into thinking that we're under attack, and then we can use that to start a war and take Iraq's oil? There's something in it for you. Can you do it? And so the Saudis are like, well, they're like, and then they finally like, okay, we'll do it. And then, so they supply the team of hijackers. They have, maybe Osama bin Laden is literally the mastermind behind the hijacking team, that he's basically trained them in Kandahar, and, that these guys are experts at taking over, commandeering a plane with box cutters. So, I believe this part of the story. This part of the story is credible. That this team, that the Saudis did take over the plane. Now, okay, but this is you have to understand that this was cooked up between the Bush family and the Saudis, and so now they're betting against the airlines. They're betting for the arms industry. So they're going to make a ton of money. They know 9/11 is going to happen. They're going to make a ton of money off of it, and then they're going to get the oil from Iraq. And then so it's like there's so much money, and then it's like, and then with the Iraq war, they're also going to be able to tax the population, so the arms industry is going to get richer, And then with 9/11, they're also destroying $2 trillion worth of Pentagon spending records. So it's just like win after win after win until they're finally like, you know what, this is really probably unethical, but this is going to get us a lot of money, and it's going to, um, yeah, that's basically what they did. They said that this is going to get us a lot of money. So they're like, okay, let's go ahead with 9/11, you know, and then it's for Israel's defense as well. It's for Israel's defense as well if Iraq is weakened, etc. So, you know, you can't discount that factor. I mean, it's like if it's going to already take place because of Israel's security, and that's where you have the lobby, and it's like then it's kind of like these, you know, it's just like people are piling on to making money. But this is kind of it's a serious thing when you start false flag attacks on your own civilians, which is, you know, this is, I think it's depressing. It's like it's depressing that it's like it's gone too far, kind of, where it's like, you know, you can see that it's greedy. Like objectively, if you're the one that carried it out, like Bush could look at it and be like, you know what, that was really greedy, and he could feel like shitty about it, you know, and then, you know, but it's like you wonder why was it so urgent like that? Why did they have to do, you know, why did it have to come to that where they're killing civilians? You know, it's a lot of people that died, and basically, you know, I think it's a little dramatic. I think it's, you know, it was a little too hurry up. You know, it's like we have to do this now. It's like so much urgency. Like, you know, nothing's going on. Like it was almost like there has to be a war, or nothing else is going on or something. You know, so it's like this is the danger that the society is getting into, is like there's constant war. There needs to be constant war in order to fuel some industry. And it's like, you know what, that's not sustainable. It's better to rethink the whole governing paradigm. How do you support your population? What are you doing for them? How is it funded, etc.? And before you start throwing money into the arms industry, those guys can make the same money. Those guys that are making all the billions off of the arms, that have the lobby power, you tell them, look, we're going to pay you the same amount of money. We'll write it into law. Now you're going to be putting it into infrastructure. You're going to own the infrastructure development companies. So basically, it's a lot of this that we're dealing with in 9/11 is the fact that you have the arms industry lobbying, and this is creating the war. Now, it could have been the Israel lobby, it could have been the arms industry lobby that actually tipped the scale in favor of going to war in Iraq. But the point is, they decided that they're going to go to war in Iraq. They needed the pretext, and 9/11 is what they cooked up. And so how did they do it exactly? So they have the hijacking team, and basically they take the hijacking team, and they hijack the planes. The planes have remote control systems, dormant systems installed 5 years earlier, and they have a GPS system that these things hook up to that has just been switched on. And so basically the CIA is able to have the hijackers take over the planes, turn on the remote guidance systems, and then basically the CIA is piloting the planes. So they fly them into the buildings. They do this perfect descent. Like it's eerie. It's disgusting. It's just like you can see the plane doing this beautiful turn, just like the turn pattern is absolutely perfect, and then it aims smack head into the department where they have the financial records in the Pentagon. So you have these hijackers that have been training flight school for God knows how long, like less than a year, and they're able to do an expert level descent maneuver where they plow into the, you know, exact perfect side of the Pentagon that's going to erase the $2 trillion worth of spending records. So, guys, this is when you start putting together the most relevant pieces, it's so obvious, but it's like, you know, this is your government. You don't want to feel treasonous towards your government. It's like, did they really think that this was so important for national defense, or did they realize how greedy it was? And then it's like, you know, so it's like, you know, we have to, it's more like a self-reflection that has to take place, and there has to be a really thorough examination of the deep state and what it's doing. It's like even this thing with Ukraine, this 30-year program with Ukraine. What is that? How can they be still on that? Why isn't there a nuclear treaty? And why haven't things moved forward? Why are they continuously escalating with Russia? This is a lose lose. Where the most important thing right now is for the West to build a bridge to the BRICS. If we have a bridge to the BRICS, then we're trading both ways, and that creates hemispheric stability. Then we're not thinking, oh, how are we going to be, launching hypersonic missiles or some bullshit. So we need one world. We need it to recognize that it's a smaller world, and that basically, wars in the Middle East are a result of Europe's poor setup of Israel following World War II and all these wars: Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, everything, Palestine, Yemen. It's all to support Greater Israel. And why does Greater Israel need to be supported? Because they don't feel safe, because they're like taking over other people's land, and because they were chased out of Europe, and they were given a deed that didn't belong to the person who gave them the deed. And so it's this whole it's a very difficult situation that basically originates with Europe following the Second World War. And basically they should have done a prosperity based defense in the Middle East. They should have developed the whole Middle East. They should have basically put money into it, build Europe, and then once there's no poverty, then everybody's happy and there's no fighting. Basically, that's the most important thing. You create the necessary conditions for life to take place for the majority of the people there, and suddenly there you have happy campers. So Israel could easily settle on the 70-30 and be safe if they plowed a lot of money into the region to make sure that they were all developed. You build Europe, and that's owed. And then at the same time, Europe should be sending European Jews passports. These people are from Europe. They don't even remember when they arrived in Europe. That's how long that they were there. Do you understand? So this kind of 15 years are going to sever that relationship is very extreme. And so, I keep repeating the same thing, but it's the truth. And it's like, there's a fear for Israelis to return to Europe because of the severity of the disconnect. And it's like, I don't blame them. I don't blame them that it's awkward, that it's difficult to get up the courage to be like, hold on a second, those are Europeans and I'm European and I should be over there. And they just went through a crazy period and they turned into cannibals, but they're not really like that. It's like they're normal. It's like slowly you're going to see European Jews go back to Europe, because it's like they've been there for 2,000 years. So anyway, in terms of the general posture of America and its, basically it has such a forward-leaning colonial setup that the British Empire dissolved, the American Empire kind of replaced it, and there are all these neo-colonies which basically are shaking off the yokes of the former colonizers, the European colonizers, American neo-colonizers. Europeans, Africans want their own countries. They want their own systems. They don't want to have it imposed on them from somewhere else. They've dealt with that for hundreds of years. Now they have a chance to consume their own resources, use their own resources for their own investment, etc. And so this is we're entering a new world where finally, we get to work on ourselves, where we can give up colonization and we can be like, hold on a second, look at all this land. Why don't we just invest? Why don't we use our resources, invest internally, forget about all the trillions of dollars of spending abroad on arms that doesn't mean anything. It's just transferring money to billionaires, and we don't want a society of billionaires. We should have a society with less than $1 billion. If you have anything more than $1 billion in a year, it gets taxed. You're not allowed to have more than $1 billion at any time. So, guys, we can imagine a much better society, much better future. But imagine that the world wants to come together, that genetic diversity is very important. Genetic diversity, the fact that you have different people, different races, they're going to come together, they're going to combine because that's going to advantage them. That's just the biological reality. And, it's just money problems in between. So anytime you have groups fighting over race, it has to do with money. There is no such thing as fighting over race because different races provide that genetic advantage that the biology just does by itself. It just intrinsically wants to combine because that's going to make it healthier. That's just science, guys. And okay, the so I really hope that the West can turn the page, that it can build the bridge to China, that it can plug into the BRICS, that it can turn the page on this Ukraine-Russia war, nuclear treaty, and yep, that's pretty much where I see the world should be heading. So now America is upset that 9/11 was constructed by the CIA, and yes, it's dramatic, and again, this is going to require a lot of self-reflection. They're going to have to go back to Kennedy and be like, how did this all get out of control, where the deep state, the intelligence agencies began to run amok and are basically the enforcers for the billionaire class that, don't see the government as the government. They just buy off the government because everything is for sale. So, all the legislation has been sale since the late 80s, according to, you can go on YouTube. There's a great Princeton study that basically finds all this, that, only money matters in Congress. And so basically, the CIA, the State Department, they're all part of this like bizarre service to the oligarchy, where it's like you're either setting up colonies for the oligarchy or you're using the Secret Service to do hit jobs on the president because you don't like his policy. So, guys, we should really rethink our government. We should rethink the agency's relationship to the executive branch. So look, we should really be loyal to the president. This is the person that's elected by the people, that is above, and that he oversees the intelligence agencies. There's nobody's allowed to even think about talking about assassinating the president. This is not for sale. You can't use the Secret Service you can't use the CIA. The CIA is not allowed to do assassinations on the president. Even if they tried to in secret, it would be foiled because nobody would go along with that kind of thing. And so, it's just, we need a new approach. We need to really see how their power is challenging the executive branch, lay it in the open and be like, look, they don't want to be audited. They don't want to have the accountability. They're in charge of the Secret Service. And so if they don't like what the president is doing, they can push the button on the president. That's not a power that is in the Constitution. We know, this is like where internally you have agencies that have outgrown their intended function, basically, because people are people. They want more money. They want more power. And now they're thinking, hold on, maybe I'm more powerful than the president. So then they're able to, cook up Kennedy assassination, Charlie Kirk assassination, etc. Anybody that they. So this is like, it's not in the interests of the nation to have that, So I think now is a great time, when you're having a nuclear treaty, basically to change that whole thing up. Not only can you bring the bases that are abroad, that are spending so much money, that are being wastefully spend it. You get the guys that are making money off of those bases. Now they're putting it into infrastructure at home, which is going to generate economic return. And at the same time, you're doing a nuclear treaty with China, Russia. So this is going to create a new window for a future where it's like, look, BRICS and America are going to be working together. And now, because it's such a radical transition, you just flip the deep state. It's just like you just change up the offices. You're like, look, we don't need the CIA to be this powerful. We can disband it. We can bring it down some notches. And nobody has to look like complete assholes, because it's such a historic shift in what's happening, that these, kind of like pettier operations will be sort of like a little more cast to history in importance as compared to these nuclear treaties and these agreements for trade between BRICS and the West. So anyway, guys, that's this episode, and I highly recommend you take a look at on YouTube. Some of these revelations about 9/11 are crazy, but so society can get to interesting situations. So it's important to keep talking, to keep communicating, to keep your empathy open, to keep your willingness to forgive open, because ultimately the goal is to make the world succeed. And to me, that's the most important contract that people have, is that the world must succeed. The world must succeed the long run. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in another episode.